So, good afternoon, dear participants, online and in the house of Epicenter. It's great to see you here in numbers, and I think like the number online is also going high up. Super good to see everybody here. So today is about growth, market data, and insights. Growth as such is not just an opportunity. It is actually our imperative. It's a necessity, as we know here in Finland, when we just purely look by the media. So in today's rapidly changing landscape, or even world order, we would say, it's very important to understand what are the factors, what are the insights we need to be aware as growth leaders or growth entrepreneurs. Therefore, I think today's topic will be giving us an insight on the macro level, geopolitics, but also deep diving with some hands-on experience from specialized leaders around their growth story. And today should also give some inspiring examples how we can actually grow in the future much, much faster and have and keep that positive spirit. So, for every entrepreneur or growth leader who is expanding or establishing their business, they need to understand, or we need to understand, what are the factors or what's upcoming in next year. And therefore, we've brought 4 specialized leaders that share their insights. So, welcome everybody to this Boardman Grow event. It's a series of growth multipliers. And this is the one which speaks about market data and insight when especially growing and establishing your market. So my name is Kirsti Laasio. I'm a board member. I was almost about to forget who am I all of a sudden. I'm a Boardman Grow board member, but I also do have a day job, which is a growth entrepreneur and CEO of an internationalizing Finnish company that's going abroad and expanding rapidly. And market data and insights has been a very key thing for me to understand when doing this internationalization path. But besides that, I also work as an advisor and board member for other companies. And to take that into account, I also do see quite many growth stories around there. And I'm really excited to hear where we're going today. So growth happens usually there where insights meet action. And this is actually a perfect example because we do have here Boardman Grow members, but also growth-minded leaders. And in case you don't know what Boardman Grow is yet, so I urge you to actually check out that boardmangrow.fi and think about whether you could be actually applying for it, because it's a network where growth leaders have sparring partners, and our mission is actually to say that none of the growth leaders will stay alone. You always have a peer to discuss or share insights with. Then, we don't do this alone today. We do have our partners Business Finland, PwC, Teknologia Teollisuus, Technology Industries of Finland, and also Springvest that have helped us to put this event together with our 4 amazing speakers, 2 of them being keynotes and 2 discussions. And we will have an opportunity here on site to deep dive later on, actually, after the speeches, to get more insights from these specialized leaders or deep dive and network and hear what's essential around that specific topics. And in case you wish to share to your wide network also your key learnings or key takeaways, don't forget to kind of mention or tag Boardman Grow, because then we can multiply our efforts as well and spread the word. And after we've kind of like been able to network in the roundtables where we have the opportunity to deep dive, there is still on site a chance to get a glass or 2 bubbly and continue networking after 4:30. So I warmly welcome you all again and hope this will be a memorable and insightful event for you guys. And also online, we will share at the end for you also some key takeaways that you won't be left alone, despite the fact not being here face to face. But let's start with our first speaker, who we have here today, who actually starts from the macro level, giving us the insight, what are the geopolitical trends, or what are the, I would say, kind of like digitalization or actual trends that will affect or which we need to be taking into account. And that's headed by Stefan Lindström, who is an ambassador of technology at Ulkoministeriö, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Stefan actually has a very good insight what are the key matters to share with you. Welcome, Stefan, and let's give him a big hand. It is, I think, you, and then here, this one?
There we go. Good afternoon. I have the great task of putting you the stage of the world in 18 minutes. 56 slides. So fasten your seat belts and let's dive into the whole thing. Are we living in a matrix? Maybe. Let's see. The first thing is, of course, AI. We have all seen what AI is doing and how it works in different ways, and it is the most revolutionary technology ever. I spoke in Athens at the Delphi Economic Forum, and a professor from MIT started his lecture by actually jumping up on the table in front of everybody and said that if I'm going to tell you that AI is the most revolutionary technology ever invented in the history of mankind, how many of you believe me? Few hands. After 1 hour, everybody was a believer. It's changing everything, and just a few examples of what it means. I was in May in Silicon Valley with the Tech Ambassadors Retreat, as we call it, and the 10 and 100 times X up there signifies the thing what we got from meeting the leading people and NVIDIA, Apple, Google, and so forth. Because what they told us was that the productivity and effectivity of AI is increasing within the next 12 months at the minimum 10 times. At the minimum. At the maximum 100 times. That's a lot of zeros. And when you already take into account the implications, what has happened during the last 2 years, and you multiply that by 10 in the next 12 months, then you realize that we are looking at something really significant. But the issue is also that technology today is geopolitics. Whatever happens in technology today, it has implications all over the world in different ways, in value chains, in how you make business, in values, in democracy, human rights, trade policy, foreign policy, security policy. Technology is the key. And of course, one of the drivers is the chip. We see everything what we do is dependent on it, and it's just enough that one ship runs aground in the Suez Canal, and the whole European car industry is standstill for a month. When you look at the value chain, on the high performance chips, almost 90% are at some point in their production process in Taiwan. So that's already a vulnerability that we have never seen before. And if you look at the value chain as a whole, I mean, every single piece of this one is worth several $100 billion. And it's not enough if you invest 15, 20 billion in somewhere. You get a tiny, tiny little fraction of that value chain. And somebody who says that they are self-sufficient in all this, in the design, in the equipment, in the wafers, in the fabless, it doesn't exist. So nobody is self-reliant in chips. And many times I've said that the world peace today is not upheld by political conductors. It's upheld by semiconductors. Because we are so interdependent on it that you cannot break the value chain in a sense that because otherwise you cannot operate. And that's the only reason why I say why China doesn't invade Taiwan. Because if they do, the world is being shut down within days. So we are talking about pretty big issues. Then we talk about 5G a little bit. What is 5G really? When you think about it, is that it's not that we are able to talk faster. It's a total revolution in industrial applications in the sense that 5G is being utilized in running ports, running big industrial things like a hospital or a mine, all self-driving cars and so forth are depending on it. A totally different thing. It's not a B2C anymore. It's a totally B2I, as I call it, business to industry. And then it's the value chain and the operational chain of 5G in general. It's also of utmost importance to understand what we are really talking about. And the thing about what I call trusted connectivity is that what happens when you're utilizing a 5G network. It's not only the network, it's also the core network. And it's the subsea cables that are of interest there because everything has to be secure. Everything has to be trusted. And now we have two kind of vendors in the world. We have those who steal all your data, and we have those who are under a democratically controlled system. I'm going back to that, coming back to that a little bit later, but this is something that is going to change so much in the world in the future, in a sense of where we are heading on these things. Then we talk about standards. Go back 10 years. Who would have believed that standards are today one of the key issues in the geopolitical world? In security policy, in foreign policy. Standards. But when you look at what the Chinese are doing in ITU, for instance, putting forward proposals, hundreds of them, that would move the standards in a way that they won't only apply to the Chinese vendors. Just one example. Same thing is happening with ISO in any other places, 3GPP and so forth. So standards are foreign policy issues today. A new thing. And then we come to connectivity as a whole, because that's of course the basis of connectivity in many different ways. And I say that globalization brought, 1.5 billion people from poverty to the lower middle class to the middle class. Connectivity is going to do the same. Now, what do I base this on? I say that UPI as an example, and UPI is the Unified Payment Interface in India. And it basically means that every single person are giving the possibility to have an identity. And the identity is a QR code. And that QR code is actually a bank account. Like I said, it's an identity. You can pay, you can save, you can do a lot of things with that one. And it gives people freedom in a totally different way than ever before. And when this means that the productivity is going to increase by 100, 200, 300, 400%. And when you in India alone has 400 million people whose productivity is rising by 400%, everybody understands that we are on a sort of brink on a pretty big revolution. The same thing is happening in Africa, in Latin America, in most of Asia. It's an amazing movement in sense. And connectivity is the one that is acting in that way. But it's all about data, isn't it? It's all about big data. And everybody understands that this is a graph showing that in today's world, about 90% of a company's value on Fortune 500 consists of data. It's not any longer useful to own forest or a factory. It's customer data, it's IP. These are the things that actually rule the world. These are the things that are valued in the stock market. And all the slides I've used many times, you heard the fact that data is the new oil, right? I disagree. I think data is the new plutonium. And why do I say this? I say it because if you utilize plutonium in a good way, it's clean energy, nuclear power. If you use it in a bad way, it's a nuclear weapon, or it can contaminate the world for the next 40,000 years. You agree? Data has exactly the same power. We have seen it in many different ways, how you can utilize data, how you can control data. China is, of course, the utmost example with the social credit system, where they utilize data in a sense of if you are able to get a passport, get a plane ticket, a rental property, or anything else. That's the utmost example, but that's really how it is. But it's also about how is data stored and how is it used? Like I mentioned on those issues. So the key issue is really about the data governance, and that's the thing what I'm working on a daily basis. We have the economical part, of course, how do you make money out of it? We have the technological part, how do you utilize it? The security part about cyber issues, and then also the legal part and the human rights part. We talk about GDPR, we talk about DMA, DSA, the AI Act, and so forth. What rights do you have as an individual to your data and how it's being used? Really important issues in so many ways. We talk about ethics, we talk about core values on these instances in a sense of that. How is this whole thing being operated? What rights do you have? And how does it affect the decisions that you make in many different ways? We talked about cyber. And we all seen what's happening with the banks being attacked here in Finland. I was in Geneva the other week and none of my bank cards worked because Nordea Bank was under heavily big attacks, cyber attacks at the same time. Same thing comes over and over and over again. And I actually read a report today on how these things are being done. And it's scary. It's really, really scary in a sense of how they operationalize things. This picture is from the port of Hamburg, where the Germans did a really brilliant thing and sold half of it to the Chinese. I don't really think it was that brilliant because it gives you the hand on everything. And we already seen issues where in South Africa, when they did decisions that wasn't really to the benefit of China, and suddenly the port stopped working because all the equipment in the port was Chinese. These are real hybrid things what you can do. We all know the hybrid things what the Russians are doing with Finland, for instance. But these are just other examples of what's going on. And here we have it sort of in an essence of what is it really all about. The European protect people, the Americans empower it, the Chinese control it. When you look at this picture, in a sense, the big picture of how this goes, I mean, this is totally, what to say, put it in a really easy way. But what about the rest? What about the whole of Africa? What about Latin America? Big parts of Asia? Where do they stand in this? And how do we get in there? And many times people ask me, sort of, I have this really fancy title, I'm the ambassador of technology. What do you do? And I say that I can reply to you in 3 words. I sell values. Because it's all about values. Where do you stand with your values? How do you utilize the data? How do you operationalize it? How do you monetize it? It's all about values. And then we have the Chinese. What values do they have? I think this is a direct quote from 1984. And if you read it quickly, because I'm moving on very fast if you haven't noticed before. Direct quote, but this is the world we live in. The state controls the data, the state controls you. And if it's not, they are not happy with it, they are going to change the past. Because how you read history is based on the past. So quite scary stuff what we are talking about here today. And then enter quantum computing. That can revolutionize the utilization of data in a sense when you combine it with AI. You can analyze the vast amounts of data in a totally different way. And that's what worries me a little bit because China, for instance, are trawling the internet today of data in an amazing way. Anything that is there, they take it. They don't know what they're going to do with it, but they know that in the future, when they can utilize a quantum computer or high-performance computers in a different way, combined with new AI algorithms, they can analyze that data. Gene tech, for instance, synthetic biology, and things like this. So it's quite interesting. I mentioned the cables. We are totally dependent on this. 99% of the world data goes through these undersea cables. And we all know that it's enough when a Chinese ship, drops its anchor and drags along and pulls all these cables into one big bundle. We don't want to see that, but the risk is there. And we have to address it in a different way. That's why Finland signed up with the international agreement also on the cables quite recently. We talk about energy and commodities in a different way than ever before, and what's been going on these things. And I know many times say that, ESG, right? And what it's all about. I give you another ESG. Energy, security, and geopolitics. That's where we are going on all these issues now. So it's remember that one. And you can say that you heard it here. The green transition, of course, big thing. If Finland messes it up, we don't have much left in a sense, but it's all over the world. And we all see the results if we don't do it. I mean, a horrible picture from Spain the other day about what's happening. The wildfires all over the world and sort of the climate change. And the green transition is the only way we can address it. But everybody understands also the fact that when you look at these pictures, how much the price is going to decrease with wind, with solar, with battery costs, that this is going to have a dramatic impact in the world, particularly on the countries depending on different kind of carbon industries. And that is going to have geopolitical implications. When Saudi Arabia loses all its income, for instance, or when Russia loses its income and nobody wants oil anymore. Long way, but we have to think about these issues. And then this one is, of course, that when you look at the dependence on the critical emerging technologies and how dependent we are on China on this, it's pretty scary in many ways. Then come to some of my favorite subjects, demographics, because they are facts. We know how many people are born and we know how many people die. You can't sort of create alternative facts in any way. And according to McKinsey, in the year 2100, we have about 3 billion retired people in the world. We have to take care of them in a different way. Migration, we are totally dependent on people in the migration side. And this is a scary picture when you look at it. The year 2100, these are Asia, Africa, Europe, 6%. How do we sell the values to them? That's the thing what we have to do. Talk about democracy, in a sense, talk about disinformation, fake news. And this is one of my favorite slides of this presentation. This guy ran into a live TV presentation in the US in the 2020 elections, and we all see what he thinks about COVID. I don't think he's a vegan. I don't think he believes in climate change or wokeism. He believes that he has the right to drink his beer and grill his steak on his backyard, and he's willing to defend that freedom. But that's not the issue. The issue is that he's afraid. He's afraid of that he doesn't understand. He's afraid of his job, his children's future. And we have these kind of people in Finland. We have them in the US, we have them in Poland, everywhere in the world. And the issue is really about how do we drag them along in this technological revolution in many different ways. So continuous learning is the key to basically everything. So learn, educate yourself, your children, your peers, and so forth. And the world is today in a what I call it a polycrisis. It's a little bit mingled the slide here. But there's so many things that's happening in the world today. We have the Ukraine, we have the Middle East, we have wars in Sudan, Yemen. The Chinese are meddling around in the South China Sea. We don't really know where everything is going. And then we have this one, the debt crisis. It's going to be interesting in a sense to see that there's only a couple of countries in the world that decreases its debt. The US is going to 200%, Japan is to 400% of GDP. And this is a staggering figure that today 93% of the whole entire world economy is debt. In 5 years it's going to be 100%. Quite an interesting thing. What happens if you don't pay the debt? Ismail Eikola says in one of his jokes that they are going to send you a letter. Anyway, another key issue is also there that the old normal is the new normal. I mean, if you go back 25 years, the inflation was 7%, the interest rates was 9%. Russia was driving war with its neighbors. China was difficult. There was a war in the Middle East. This was the old normal. We just had 25 years of really, really good times. And now we are back to the new old normal. Not the new normal, the old normal. Anyway, finalizing very quickly on the things. Economy used to drive politics, now politics is driving economy. Why do I say this? Because these numbers are going into the economy, 3,000 billion euros. The IRA, the Infra Act in the US, the CHIPS Acts, the Global Gateway, and so forth. Enormous amounts of money are going into the system. We are not in a market economy anymore. I call it strategic capitalism. You can call it strategic autonomy, technological decoupling. You can call it ally shoring, friend shoring, reshoring. But the issue is really that security influences trade policy. And we have to talk about resilience, understanding these value chains in a different way or how they work. And the value is being, how we create value is changing. It's going to change all these internal things also inside countries. And that's the debate we have in Finland right now. And also a little bit about China still. The blue one where the parts where the biggest trade partner was the US in the year 2000. This is the situation in the world today. China. Quite a big change in 20 years. But the technology, as I said, it drives foreign security policy, democracy, values, productivity, creativity. Basically everything is really there in a sense of that it's technology, science that drives it. And we talked previously about the rules-based international order and how important it is. Does it exist anymore? I say it doesn't. But we are in this kind of system that this is where the rules-based international order is, and everybody's just pulling out their pieces from there to their own benefit, looking in a silo in a sense of where they are heading. We know this is going to change. We know the sort of things where things are moving. These are the building blocks or the actors. They are going to be the sort of bricks, the AUKUS, the the Quads, the plurilateral agreements on quantum or cables and God knows what, the EU, the Belt and Road. And these are the building blocks. We talk about AI, we talk about Web3, quantum, we talk about water, electricity and food. New concept in many different ways when you talk about these issues. Where are we going? I don't know. But what I do know is that master AI before it replaces you. And then the last provocative slide. If you don't like change, try irrelevance. Thank you.
Thanks, Stefan. I think I was hearing in the crowd that it was exhausting. Is there any positivity?
It is. I can do this also in 2 hours, and then we have a little bit more slides. So this is running through. But the good thing about this is, of course, that I always measure the audience in a sense of how many of you were using your mobile phones on some things, and I don't think I saw a single one. So that's why I keep up the pace, so because you are afraid of losing something if you look at your mobile phone. So that's in a sense, but feel free to contact me in a sense, and I can open so many more details about this, because this is, when I look at the whole geopolitical landscape right now, this was just a small scratch on the surface. But the main point is, of course, that you have to look at these things in your business today. You cannot leave geopolitics out because it's so incredibly important. And just as an example of this is that Nokia just appointed my good friend Mikko Hautala, and he's going to be the Senior Vice President for Geopolitics and Governmental Relations. Vice President of Geopolitics. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do we have time for questions? Or do we have to
I think we are deep diving then in the round table. So thank you, Stefan. I think it was really, as said, an exhaustive, but it was very broad overview. Thank you very much. So everybody who wants to kind of like give a extra round of applause to Stefan, now it's the time. And we're moving on, and the next speaker, we agreed that I'm going to keep it short because he needs his time as well. So we do have Steven Terhorst. Was it right? Proud Dutch, an entrepreneur, independent advisor, and also entrepreneur who will open up for us the insights. What do we need to know about the upcoming times and years, especially in terms of growth? Thanks. A warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsti. It's an honor to be here. There's quite a few people that showed up. I'm really surprised with that. On the other hand, not, because it's growth. And I was thinking, when I was asked to present here, growth, what does it mean? Because we all are working for a growth company, correct? So I Googled it. I thought, okay, what means a growth company? You guessed it already. A growth company means that you are growing faster than the average economy. Now, going back to reality, we are in Finland. What is the current growth rate in Finland? Anyone? 0.5. I hope, honestly, that you all work for a company that grows more than 0.5% this year. So that means we all work for a growth company, I guess. Well, that's what growth actually means. But I'm also here with the head-on of Boardman International. And I can't let it to merge those two, because I think they go hand in hand. You have the international side, you got the growth side. We're all Finnish companies, Finland-based companies, growth companies. So where does the growth come from? Correct. I guess also outside Finland. And that's what I try to highlight today a little bit for you, because they asked me, can you look and tell a little bit about the future outlook? I said, future outlook is such a broad term. The first picture I could find on the internet was this. And why? Because I think it captures a lot of things in one visual. It is, of course, green. We all want to work on a green future. I can see a nice tree, I see a robot arm, and if I listen to Stefan, I mean, we have a very scary future ahead of us. But I also see a crystal ball, and that's interesting, because the crystal ball is partly transparent and partly not transparent. And that's the topic I want to cover today, because future outlook, in my view, is not just future outlook. So what I mean is that if I ask 10 people in the audience, what is your future outlook? I probably get 10 different answers. It has to do, of course, with who you are, where you're coming from, in what kind of industry are you active, what kind of products and services do you sell, and you skew your forecast to what you do. But the past actually goes also further than that, because the past also means where are you rooted? Well, I used to live in Finland for 10 years, and now I moved back to Amsterdam. But due to my family circumstances, I'm actually spending now, again, 1 to 2 weeks a month back in Finland. And I love to have that split between, let's say, Central Europe and Finland, because it's a very actual, everyday encounter that I have when I talk to management on how they perceive their future. Because that's what I do. I'm a consultant, I talk to a lot of people, and they love to talk about how they see the world. But I heard another interesting term the other day, which is about creative leadership, or leadership creativity. That's, I think, the sweet spot where we are today. It's not exactly that you can forecast the future. It's not about that. It's about how do you translate where you are coming from, understanding that, understand where you are today, and how do you make your scenarios, your prognosis for the future. Another picture I like. Why? Because in my view, future outlook is not about just data. Because if that would be the truth, that's easy. Everyone can do that, correct? You just Google the data, you put it in a slide, and that's it. You see, the majority, though, can be analyzed by data. But there is this beautiful keyhole in the shape of a bulb, upside down, that I call, that's the creative part of your future outlook. And how you define that, how big that keyhole is, depends, of course, on your creativity. Depends on who you are, where you're coming from. Now it becomes interesting. Because today I have a Finnish audience, tough crowd. Because we are all human beings with our thinking and feeling as acting. And you might say, yeah, obviously, duh. But this is interesting because, like I said, if I talk to a Finnish manager and I ask him about, okay, tell me about your future, instantly, he's thinking about, yeah, Finland this, Finland that, Russia, Sweden, Baltics. And if I'm lucky, I hear a bit further away, China, US. But they're very narrow to a certain geographical area because that's where they're active today. So they act accordingly. Of course, if we look at the broader scope, how does that work? Again, if I talk to someone in Holland, we have a certain history. Not always proud of that, but we have that history. Traveled the world, we saw a lot of different places, and we started trading at a very early age. The Finnish history, of course, is slightly different. I don't need to explain you know better than I do. But what I do know is that you have two relatively strong neighbors that have influenced your past. Geographically, I would call it's the corner of Europe. It's a beautiful place on many different aspects. But if I'm back in Amsterdam, and every time I say, hey, I'm flying back to Helsinki tomorrow, where? Helsinki. Ah, okay, yeah, that's north, Lapland? No, it's Helsinki. Just to give you an idea that Finland is still seen as that corner in Europe, which is a pity. It has to do, of course, with marketing, PR, how do you market your market, how do you market your country. But it has an impact on how you guys look into the future. Culturally, I'll get back to that. And economically, very interesting. I thought, how do I put some hard data behind this? And if you look at the economical point of where Finland is today, your GDP last year was 331 billion. What percentage of your GDP came from exports? Anyone? You guys are growth companies, come on. You do export, I hope. Bit higher. No, too high. No, it's 41%. And I do understand things that happened in Ukraine and Russia became more difficult, but still, today, or actually last year, 41% of the GDP in Finland came from exports, which, if you compare it on the European scale, is at the bottom. And why do I highlight this? Because I think if you are growth companies, the growth comes not from Finland, correct? Yes, maybe from the first phase. And we all know the S-curve. And we all want to have this acceleration in the beginning. So what we do, Finland is a club, correct? Where we call friends and neighbors and army friends. And hey, I have a new company. Come on, help me. Good for your first phase. And then you get into the second phase. Yeah, we go to Sweden, Baltics, maybe Denmark, Germany. Good. And then you start to really hit the ground running, and then you have to move faster. And how are you doing that? And that's, I think, interesting, because if you look at the Dutch economy, again, I don't want to be proud, but it's the reality, 86% of our GDP is exports. I know we are a small country, we have to export, otherwise we don't survive, but it's also the mentality. So, that's what I try to highlight, is that where are we coming from? So you cannot disregard the past, looking at where you are today, in order to look into the future. All right, habits. I can't leave it, but I think this is a very interesting page. Because if you look at this, I think we're all familiar with this somehow. This is who you are in general as people, Maslow, we need to survive. Finland as a society, how it has evolved, what are your key elements of where Finns can find themselves in. And of course, everyone is individual, luckily, and you also have your own unique characteristics. When I look at this picture, I see a few things that are interesting. Ultra honesty. Little case, last week I was here, bought a new computer, went to the store, did my homework, go up to the counter, say, hey, sir, I'm picking up my computer. Sir, I actually can't say this, but you can get a better one at that store. Literally, I'm not joking. So I went to the other store and bought the computer over there. As an example, if you want to do growth, don't maybe always be ultra honest. Interesting. This is also interesting about foreigners. Uneasiness with foreigners. Hold on. If you want to go international, you want to grow, you need diversity, you need to go across the border. So these are interesting things like use of silence. And what I mean by that, another good example, I do a lot of business with Finland, also outside Finland, for Finnish companies, but also foreign companies that are doing business with Finland. How often I have got the question, Steve, we had such a great meeting with the Finnish company. Unbelievable. They were on fire. Haven't heard a thing for 3 weeks. And then I said, that's good news. Take it easy. And yeah, after the 4th week, they came back, still excited. But foreigners are not used to that. They are, when things are getting hot, they want to really get things done. They don't wait for 3-4 weeks, you know. They're already next to the next company. So keep that in mind, that these are all things that are part of your DNA that are also things you need to be aware of if you want to grow internationally. I'm not going to worry too much with this, but I want to highlight a few things that really struck me as a person dealing with Finnish companies. I want to highlight that I love your work-life balance. But please keep in mind there's an hour difference. So if I'm in Amsterdam and you guys go home by 4 o'clock, it's 3 o'clock in Amsterdam. That's just after my lunchtime. I still have half a day to go. So if you really want to push for that international sales, be more flexible on that. Lack of international diversity. I know I really want to push for that because diversity is key. How many people, non-Finns, do you have in your management team, on your board, as an advisor? That is critical to grow your company international. All right. A little bit of theory. I don't like that, but that's some part of my presentation. So the question was future outlook. So the question I thought, how can I relate the future outlook to your growth strategy? Because that's key. That needs to be interlinked. And eventually, if you do this correct, you have the right input for your growth strategy, leading to financial performance. And then again, and that's the tricky part, people become complacent. Oh, we're doing fine. We scored more than 0.5%. We scored even 5 or 10%. So we're doing things right. Now the question comes, honest question to you guys. How many of you do a future outlook on a regular basis? And regular means more than once a year. Any hands in the air? All right. Let's say 1% in this room. Unless you're shy, but I don't think so, because this crowd is all about growth and international. So let's say 1-2%. Ow, come on guys, I'm talking here about future outlook. You want to know what is ahead of you, correct? You want to know where your company stands. Another nice anecdote. If I would ask an American, what is your outlook for the next 2 years? He gives me 100. Oh, I go for 100. And he makes 80. And he's unhappy. Now I ask a same situation, same company, same industry, a Finnish person. He might say 50. And he makes 60 in 2 years. And he's very happy. The moral of the story is, future outlook is also daring. Dare to challenge yourself, your teams, because you need to go that extra mile. So if you are happy with the 50 and you score a 60, of course you're happy. 20% over, woohoo! The American is not happy because he was ambitious. He shot for the moon, ended among the stars. He made 80. So in practice, he actually made more. Was he unhappy? That is how things work when you look at future outlook. I also like this picture, because if you look at the growth strategy, you know where you want to be. Puzzle piece fits exactly. And you know exactly this is the path, how we get there. But the interesting part of the growth strategy is, because most people got it wrong, they think it's only forward-leaning. No, the growth strategy is working back to where you want to be. Okay, so it's actually a backward exercise. So you look where you want to be, and then you say, okay, these are the steps I need to take in the next 1, 2, 3 years, so that I can fit that piece in here, in an ideal world. Because we all know, we just heard from the previous presenter, the world is changing faster and faster. So why then is future outlook so important? Now, there we got it. It's all about predictions. So if we know the past, if we know where we are today, and we know with our growth strategy where we want to be, in a normal world without any strange things, you might get there. But we have technological advancements, consumer behaviors that change, competitive field is changing, so that will influence your decision making today. And what does that mean? That means actually very basic. Every quarter, I believe, you need to challenge your strategy, because you most likely have three scenarios. You got your best, your mediocre or normal, and your worst case. And you need to see whether that is still relevant, or has the things changed. And a good example was indeed Ukraine. Not many people were prepared for that, and they were actually responding too late. And too late means after 6, 9 months they realized, oh shit, we lost a lot of business here, now we need to look into other areas. Way too late. So what is your fallback plan? Yeah, this is also an interesting chart. When I consult companies in Finland, it's always interesting that we start talking about this area. They love the data. They love the facts. Yeah, like the guy that before me, Stefan, very good presentation. I liked it. About a lot of data and facts, and we can all analyze this. I'm looking at it also from a different angle. I think what is equally important is this part. You need to have that creativity to think outside the box when it comes to your future scenarios. Free imagination, it's scary, because you can go wild, that's why it needs to be managed. But it's important, almost equally important, that it's not just about data and hard facts. It's also about gut feel. Are you listening to your stomach and to your heart? Do you really feel that your business, your industry is moving the right direction? And that's often the right feeling. Well, the must-haves I think are already covered by the previous presenter as well. I want to only highlight this one. Again, everyone tends to look at geopolitics, AI, legislation, sustainability, the usual suspects, especially in Finland. But this one, again, I am a true customer believer. They're always right. And what are you doing to really listen to the clients? What kind of exercises are you doing? Very, very interesting. Anyway, I still have 2 minutes, 2 slides, so I can slow down. So my experiences are the following, and again, I don't want to highlight all of them. I want to just highlight a few, and if you have questions, you can ask later. The key thing I already mentioned is that a future outlook is not a one thing off. It's not that you go into the boardroom, you do your future outlook, you build your scenarios, and you say, done deal. Let's move on to the next year. It's an ongoing exercise. Keep that in mind. It's not just a one thing off. Another thing is that dare to implement. What I see, especially in the Nordics, is that people are very, very good about talking. Strategy, more strategy meetings. And then I ask, okay, but what have we actually done? What have we learned? What have we implemented? Yeah, not yet. We're not there yet. We haven't finalized the strategy yet. So find that balance in thinking and strategizing and implementing and learning. Already covered the creative leadership. I think it's crucial. Yeah, and of course I have to say this today, a little bit of a commercial for Board International. I think that if you're not doing it yet and you think that you need a more diversified team or board or advisors, definitely consider that one because it's critical if you want to go international and grow further. Key takeaways. I kept it short, easy to remember. Focus. As a growth company, there's so many things you can do. Focus is critical. That's what I did with my companies. It has really worked for me. I even went to the extreme in terms of focusing. When I had my company, I only focused on a very niche part of the business and of the industry, which became very successful. Was I there to take that niche step? Agile, make sure that you are agile enough, just think, but do as well. Ambitious, I mentioned that, and be bold. And be bold, that's my last slide. This is what my boss told me when I got my first job at Heineken. And first I thought he was joking. Like, what does he mean by that? Now I'm 35 years older. And I think he's right. And I always keep this slide in my mind. Because it's true that if you want to pick the most beautiful flowers, they always grow close to the vine. And that means you need to take the risk to get better results. Thank you very much.
That was a great closing, very inspiring. I have actually a quite interesting anecdote to make. You mentioned about the international board members that are here in Finland, or actually people who would like to be board members. And there is, you are part of the, do you want us as the boardman, international member, make a short
small pitch here. I'm not sure how many of you are aware of Boardman International. Boardman International is a team of minded people that want to grow the number of foreign representatives in the boards of Finnish companies. I have been in Finland now since, well, 12 years, the last 2 years now, a bit more in Amsterdam, but I'm back actually. And I'm full of energy to really promote that. Because when I look around, when I talk to Finnish companies, I'm still surprised by the low number of foreigners dealing with the Finnish companies. And I also have seen the benefit of it in other countries, that if foreigners, and not just Dutch of course, but if foreigners are working together in a diversified environment, you really do get better results. It's a fact. You will have more diversity, you have more different angles, things that you never thought of, because what I presented about your past, you guys are coming from a homogeneous country, having all gone through the same school, same army, same whatever, universities, same kind of workplaces. I think it's critical to be open at least to listen to a non-Fin, to see what they have to say. On a board level, that's something I understand has a few challenges, which I think most of them are not really challenges. It's just a matter of changing your habits. One of them is language. If you are not willing to change that, well, then it stops over there, because Finnish is not a language that you learn overnight. But that's something that we are working on as Boardman International. We want to really reach out to a lot of companies. You might be the big companies for tomorrow. So keep in mind that international professionals living in Finland, or they lived in Finland and moved back to their country, but still having ties with Finland, can be a really good source of advisor, helper, broadening your view. So keep that in mind. So, Boardman International.
Yeah, thank you. That was an intensive pitch. Great, great. But I said, like, we like to use these opportunities, and therefore I really encourage everyone. We do have also Tuomo Haukkovara here in the crowd. So everyone here on site, like, grab Tuomo's arm and like ask for more details. But time moves on, and I said, like, great points, and especially one which was very close to my heart is don't forget the customer. So take the customer's perspective into account, because customers are the ones who bring the money. And now I think we have, after the two very exciting keynotes, arrived to the point where we actually dive a bit deeper into real-life experience. We do have here Sandra Lounamaa, who is representing the board as a board member of Gubbe, and she has been founding the company. So Gubbe is actually a new form of elderly care. And she has actually first-hand insights also how did they kind of like go international, and also what are the lessons and what to do and what not to do. And she will be interviewed and discussed by Teemu Polo, who is actually the head of entrepreneurship at the Technology of Finland. So welcome both of you, and the mics are here for you to continue the discussion. Let's give a hand.
Wow, that was a great start. So we will not starve you with a lot of slides, but we do have a lively discussion hopefully coming up. So I have the privilege of getting with me on the stage Kuppe founder. Kuppe is a real growth company that has actually dived into this kind of say larger phenomenon of elderly care and say macroeconomics, I could say. They raised 7.5 million euros from investors. They are already like roughly 2 million euros of revenue. They have thousands of Kuppes there around the world. But so how did you start up with that?
Yeah, thank you, Teemu. It was nearly 20 years ago when me and my mom were looking for an elderly care service for my grandmother. We felt that she needs some help outside of our family. We had a really small family. We tried different solutions, public home care, private companies. With all of them, they were like really similar problems. We didn't know who was visiting, when they were visiting. We didn't get any reports from the visits, and me and my mom were thinking like, how come is this possible that in a country like Finland there isn't a decent elderly care service available? So the idea came there, and like 15 years later I met with my amazing co-founder Meri Tuuli, and then pieces came together and we decided to found a company.
Yes, it's indeed a great story, and you've had, say, quite a few ups, downs, forward, backwards, all sorts of these kind of growth company realities so far. But I was curious when I was looking into, and we had some discussion before. So I was curious about your business models, because you have had a few. So you've been doing, say, direct customer sales. You've been doing B2B, B2G, and so forth. So how did that up?
Yeah, so it all started from the vision that so Volt was just founded. All the startups were blooming at that time, and our vision was that we're going to build the elderly care of Volt of elderly care. So really, with technology scaling the traditional elderly home care. That was the idea back then, and then B2C was then the obvious choice to go in. B2C business has been always really important for us, but as you know that in Finland and also in Nordics, you kind of wish or wait that these kind of services are provided by the public sector. But we realized this only like 4 years later. After B2C, we founded a B2B business. It's also a really important business for us. For example, employee benefit, where companies can provide Kuppe service as a part of their employee benefit program and kind of communicate how they are really how they care for their employees and want to provide this kind of service for them. And lastly, then the public sector business that we opened like 1.5 years ago. And that's really a business where we are waiting the 10x growth in Finland and in Sweden.
Do I understand right that it's kind of a phased approach in terms of maturity? So you start building up and testing your kind of business models and your service, ramping up things light on the B2C, then turning on to B2B to kind of get more growth in order to be able to then grow into B2G.
Yeah, it's a continuous like testing and seeing what works and then doing that.
Was there kind of a market data, or was it based on instinct, or how did that evolution kind of work on?
Both. I really like the previous presentation about the gut feeling, and that has always played quite a big role in our business, doing what feels right. And if you see that's working, then you just repeat that.
So in terms of say market data, you are more like jumping into the water and then measuring the water at that point and figuring out.
You could say so. Of course, there's always a place for a really good analysis and data.
Yes, but at least I've been, I don't know how many of others in the in the audience here. I've been in an organization that was kind of a paralysis by analysis type of method, but startups say tend to be a bit different, which I think is very fair to point out. But you've been also say growing beyond Finland. Could you tell something about that?
Yeah, from the very beginning, we kind of I think it all starts from the vision and the ambition you set for your company, and also to the previous presentation. It's I think the biggest problem in Finland is that we kind of lack ambition. I think the ambition should always be that you should be the world's best in your own sector, and when you set that kind of vision, then it's only it's about action after that. But if you don't have the ambition, you cannot never go big. And I think that's the problem for many Finnish companies, that they don't even think of going abroad.
So you started in Finland, but then you were indeed expanding outside.
Yeah, right. So at the very beginning, we knew that we want to grow rapidly and we need some outside funding. For that, the pitch needs to be that the business is scalable and scalable outside of Finland also. So Sweden was the first market we entered after 2 years of founding the company, and then the UK market was the third market where we entered in 2022.
So fairly rapid expansion in a sense that you didn't have say time for maturation in Finland, but you were very ambitious of going. So how did Sweden go?
Sweden is still a great, strong market for us. I think I could say that we've already established a place there. The brand knowledge in Sweden, in the study we did, was 18% of the Swedish population knew what Goope was. I think that's fairly good. But
I think that calls for applause. Yeah. That's a fairly nice figure from a startup growth company.
Yeah. What was the question?
Okay, so you were explaining about say going into the Swedish market, right. and then this kind of traction there, and I was wondering if there's any say market related takeaways from that. So how did you kind of make these decisions on the fly?
Yeah, well, Sweden is kind of the first option for Finnish companies, as we have the Swedish-speaking people in our team, and our business model was kind of similar than Swappi had back then, that we could open new markets from our headquarters from Finland. You didn't need to have boots on the ground back then, so it was kind of easy to open the Swedish market back then. And it's still run from the Helsinki office mostly. We have only few people in Sweden.
So is that Sweden then B2B, B2C, B2G?
All, yes.
Okay. But then you continued expansion, right? You went to UK.
Yeah. Then we were in a place where we needed to raise more funding. It was in the end of 2021. And then we ended up raising the 4 million euro round in 2022. And the pitch back then to investors was that, we have a scalable business model. We already have Sweden, Finland. Now we need more money to open more new markets. And then kind of for investors, kind of Sweden, Finland, small markets, we needed something bigger. So then we did a study, is it German or UK? And we decided to pick UK. So we got the money for €1 million, and then we needed to open the UK market then.
Yeah, but it's kind of so you created already a kind of say, proven track record out of Finland and Sweden, and then continued. But so you said that you were comparing Germany, which is a very, very traditional market for Finnish, especially the tech companies, but you chose UK instead. So can you kind of elaborate on that? How did you?
Yeah, those were the options due to the market size. And German market, after talking to other startups that went to the German market, like really hard market in so many ways, to traditional, let's say that was the reason. UK was easy due to the language reasons, and so we started it in 2022 with 4 people, 5 people team in London. And we were kind of like reserved like €1 million that's our budget we could like try and spend there. And we really quickly noticed that there's a huge need for our service. There's really similar problems that we have here in Nordics, that there is no decent elderly care services available, and there's a huge lack of nurses, and really similar problems. So with our service, there's a supply side to get the Guppe helpers on board and recruit them. We really found that our kind of concept is interested in these. Guppe helpers are usually people in their 20s studying and doing this job meanwhile they're studying. So it really started working on the supply side. The customer side, we started from the B2C. It started we got really good leads, really good customers, but we realized that the market is huge. It's nothing to, if you compare the Nordic markets, it's like 50 times bigger, and we learned that it would require so much more resources, team-wise, market budget, like so much more resources, and then at the same time, you know what happened. Market, there wasn't cheap money available anymore, and the kind of shift, investor focus went from profitability. It went like fast growth to profitability. So the growth wasn't as fast as we would love to see at that point. So there was really kind of difficult decisions to be made.
Profitability for growth companies, especially opening up and doing aggressive growth, is a bit tricky kind of combination. But so you were indeed looking for a big market, and you really ended up with one. So,
Yeah.
But it's this 1 million. That's kind of a rule of thumb figure that goes around. If you need to open up in a new market, that's 1 million. So how did you have this kind of say more kind of concrete background of that? That how would it kind of work? So you said that you had 5 boots on the ground from London. So kind of how did that kind of evolve, this kind of go-to-market strategy there?
So then we were there like 12 months, and then we made the decision that we need to back down, and due to that changed market situation, and we were burning too much money, and we couldn't afford it anymore. So we backed down, and now it's kind of freezed the market, and we made like really, really valuable learnings. And we didn't spend, I think we spent like 700 or something like that. But I think million is a good number of like you need to be ready to spend that kind of amount at least to see any kind of results.
Yeah, but basically you started kind of pulling up the brakes on the kind of growth because of this profitability requirement by the investors, which is kind of a pity in a sense, but it's still a good market. But you ended up kind of say pulling down from that. But can you still elaborate, because that's I think a huge learning for the audience, that okay, so you were indeed accelerating the market expansion. You had resources ready for that, but then how did you then? Can you elaborate on the decision making follow up say on the board or on the operational management level, that how did you kind of come up with this kind of change of plans, or did it come directly from the investors?
No, it didn't. Well, we have board meetings every month, so it wasn't a surprise for anyone. So we are like following the numbers on monthly basis. So of course we see that the market is not opening as fast as we would love to see, and then at the same time you see the market going. So it has been like a continuous of thinking process. So. It was a really hard decision, and always when you think about the team and you build a relationship, it's always like really hard decisions.
So this was a learning kind of growth through growth through different kind of business models in Finland into Sweden, convincing the investors into kind of pushing and doing this kind of growth expansion, reserving, starting to do that, but then pulling back based on the kind of market situation. Yeah. I think that's a good learning for everybody. But you have some takeaways that I've been. Can you please go through these?
Yeah. I think like to highlight the first part. I think like it's always like so much more important the execution and the actions over like perfect planning, as said before. So 2 little Finnish companies go abroad and have the courage to open new market. They like tend to overplan. So like. Key takeaway is you don't need perfect plans, you just need to start the execution, and meanwhile you learn and then build your plans. We already covered the 1 million euro investment. I don't know if it's a small or big number for you, but I think that's something that before spending that money you don't really kind of know if you made an impact or not. Then the third part is really important. I think like it always comes down to the team, the people that are doing the job, no matter like how tech-led company you have. So especially in market expansion, you really require team members with a founder's mindset, those that are like really willing to go above and beyond. And at least, especially the first year, is really demanding. So it's like always, it's a really good extra if you have the founding team members of opening the new markets, and usually you do have them. But finding good team members, it's like super difficult, but it comes down to the team always.
Indeed it does. But hey, I would like to kind of welcome applause for Sandra for sharing this growth story with us today, and I guess we will be around. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Honesty, I think Stephen was nodding here, his head. It's also like being agile instead of overly planning. So these are kind of like the key lessons. And I have to say, like Sandra briefly announced that she's already up to something new, establishing something new. So more growth coming here. So a great role model, great example. So make sure you network or connect with her people online as well. Look for Sandra Lounamaa. But we've arrived to the point where we actually dig one level deeper in order to understand what is essential and how to grow global growth. And we have here Tim McDonald, the marketing director of ISI. I'll let you briefly explain yourself what ISI is, but my understanding is that you get an uninterrupted view over the Earth, and you use the data actually to make the life better on Earth, which is actually a great promise, and I'm really looking forward to hear that. And the discussion will be led by and founder, entrepreneur, and actually CEO of the Superson company, Sampa Vilkuna, who actually is also a Boardman Grow member. So welcome on stage to kind of like deep dive in your topic.
Thank you, Kirsti. Good to be here, and welcome, Tim.
Yeah,
so we'll spend the next about 18 to 15 minutes to talk about a little bit about the market data and how, especially from the marketing perspective. But before we go there, we would be super eager to hear what is ICEYE. Some of you probably know.
So for those of you that haven't heard of ICEYE, ICEYE is a new space company that is building its own satellites to essentially help humanity gain a very detailed view of what's happening on the surface of the planet. We've launched 38 satellites. We're based out of Otaniemi. The company has raised about 480 million to date, and we've grown to about over 700 employees around the world. Espoo/Helsinki is our head office. We also have a pretty big site in Poland and also building a pretty big site in the US. And then we have people working all over the world. There's essentially 3 different business lines that we focus on. The first one is selling data, mostly to governments for different use cases, including national security use cases, but also environmentally related use cases, oil spills, melting ice, whole bunch of stuff, illegal trafficking or vessel detection, deforestation, and like monitoring what's happening, the changes on the surface of the earth to a very precise degree of detail. So able to really get a level of detail that hasn't been possible before. And we use a technology for that called SAR, which is synthetic aperture radar. And with SAR, you can see through cloud and you can see through darkness. And that's something that covers most of the earth most of the time and is a huge limitation for traditional...
Can you see us right now?
We cannot see through the roof.
Okay.
Yet.
Thank God.
So that's, there's the data business. That's the first business unit, if you like. Then there's a trend of governments really wanting to have sovereign control over the whole tech stack and wanting to have their own space program. So now we're also building space programs to scale up satellites for different countries. And then that involves building a ground station, the satellites, the launch. We work with SpaceX for the actual launch and getting the satellites into orbit. And then we work with them over a long period of time to get the government up and running with that capability. And then the third line of business is our solutions business, and that's focused heavily on emergency management for governments. So there's right now around the world, obviously, a lot of wildfires, a lot of floods, and natural catastrophes. And that's where we're not just delivering data, but we're packaging it up with actionable insights to improve response and recovery efforts on the emergency response side for natural catastrophes and fires and so on. But then also on the private sector side, for example, in insurance, to help insurance companies understand as quickly as possible the impact on their portfolios from the natural catastrophes and help them accelerate claims and other different use cases. So that's kind of the business in a nutshell, and it's at a heavy growth phase right now.
Yeah, thank you. When I was listening Stefan's presentation, I felt that as much as I know about ICEYE, I felt that you were kind of ticking quite many megatrend boxes that were going through the 56 slides. So, and if I'm thinking now Sandra's mathematics, you would be now able to go into 480 countries, right? Launching a new one with 480 million. But you work a bit differently.
Yeah.
But today we're here also talk about a little bit about market, but also you are a big brand person. You have an extensive background from leading brands and leading brand teams. So what does it kind of, from your perspective, let's start from the brand, for example, what's the importance of brand when thinking about the new markets?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think first, just to level set, it's like, well, what is a brand? We're not talking about the logo or the visual expression and the identity of the brand. Those are important elements, but you don't start with that. It's a great idea to think of a brand like a person. And if you're creating a person, which we do all the time, you don't start with what they're wearing. You need to think about what are their values, what do they stand for, how do they see the world, how are they going to speak, what are they going to say. And that's the first thing. And brands are really key to making your business relatable and building a connection with your users. I mean, if I would just say a few brand names here, just to test what kind of feelings you get when you hear different brand names. I mean, if I say Apple, some of you probably think of Apple very differently to others. If I would say Tesla, maybe half the people in the room might cringe. If I say Meta, Facebook, some people might think of it as a social platform. Other people have privacy, trust issues. So a brand is really, really powerful. And those feelings and emotions are not wrapped up in the logo. So I just want to break that out. And then, well, why does a brand really matter? I mean, it's essential to build trust. And it's also something that becomes a very big asset for the business. A lot of the Fortune 500 companies, in addition to their data being a big asset, their brand is a huge asset. And if you want to scale and go international, it's very hard to do that if your brand is a mess. So I would say that a good brand is really key to going international and scaling your business effectively.
I think we have quite many growth entrepreneurs and growth companies here in the audience. How do you know? Not every one of us has a millions of euros to spend into building a nice brand. So I would create a new acronym, MVB. So what would be the minimum viable brand if you're thinking about going into a new market? What needs to be what do you need to have if you're going into really concrete things?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake to make is like to start with the creative process and be like, okay, what's our logo? What's our typeface? What's a color palette? You really got to start with the word and the messaging and be like, okay, what's our value proposition? And it needs to be super, super clear, super understandable, relatable, not the business talking about itself, but something that the customer wants to hear. So for example, with ISI, we could say, use, satellite technology for governments or something like that. But they'd be like, what are you talking about? So for us, we would elevate the message to something more like, on a top level, you of course need to have different levels of messaging on a brand level or a product level, but we'd elevate the narrative more like to building resilience and building new capabilities to help you, for insurance, let's say, size losses more quickly at the peak of the storm and other things. I mean, one of my favorite examples of powerful messaging, and probably a lot of people have heard this before, but it's about 23 years ago when Steve Jobs, he launched the first iPod, and the whole value proposition was about capacity and that, but he didn't stand on stage and say, okay, here's the new iPod with a 5 gigabyte memory. He got upstairs on the stage and just said, that's 1,000 songs in your pocket. And it's just like, you get it instantly. You don't need to over-explain it. It's relevant, it's valuable, it's simple. So starting with the messaging, and it goes for your brand story. It's not just about like coming up with a slogan, but having very clear, relatable language.
But let's park on a little bit into value proposition, because that's not probably always so clear what does it really mean. But when you're thinking about a new market, you say that, okay, you need to first to have a really good value proposition. So how do you know that in this whatever market you're going, that it really works? How do you test it, or what's any tips on that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. So I think today it's easier than ever before to test different messages and value propositions. And get some real data. For example, put together a landing page, try different ad variants, and see which ones get the highest engagement and click-throughs and conversions or leads. So you can test stuff. You don't need to go into the market and hire a team there and build a local sales team. Especially now post-COVID, it's easier to start remote, get validation. I mean, of course, it depends what business you're in, but generally it should be pretty feasible to get some traction. And then, of course, if you are doing outreach more B2B style, then you can also hit your audience with messaging and before you reach out to them, and then kind of follow up. So use paid media to get them on LinkedIn, and try different things and see where the engagement is, and then have sales follow.
I think we just heard today from one Dutch guy who was quite diplomatically trying to say to us as Finns that you better be that you should go and execute also. So I think it's time for us that we are planning quite long and then testing. And is it okay to test if your value proposition is not right yet? So if you go into market and meet real customers.
Yeah, I mean, but as a brand, you're also making promises. So you need to be able to deliver on what you promise. Otherwise, your brand's not going to be a good one. And you're building a brand no matter what. So there's often two pitfalls. So one is that the marketing is kind of disconnected from the product and the offering, and they're just doing generic stuff. And then the product team or the tech side of the business, let's say, is frustrated with marketing doing its own thing. The other pitfall is when it goes too far the other way. And then you've almost got engineering saying, okay, the product's ready here, launch it, and putting words in the mouth of the marketing team and going out there with very technical-led messaging. So the other thing to note is that it's a common pitfall as well when you go out there, like you spearhead your brand or your message or go-to-market with like a very specific thing, and you haven't got a messaging hierarchy. So, for example, if you are launching something, you don't start with like features and specs and benefits. The principle is that the earlier the user is in the buyer journey, the less information they need. They first need to just understand why you exist, is it relevant, and then the further down the buying journey they go, the more detail they're going to need.
Yeah, so now when you have your value proposition ready and you are ready to test it and you have tested and then comes to the brand, the itself brand. So so how would you look into that? What are the parts when you open a new market?
Yeah, that's a great segue like into brand experience overall. So you get your value proposition clear, and then it has to be like, okay, understanding that customers today care a lot about the experience around the product, not just the product itself. And that's going to set the tone for everything. And you don't get to decide where new customers essentially start their journey. It might be meeting somebody from the company, it might be something on social media, or it might be going to the website. And if all those things are different and out of whack, or even if the marketing side is really strong and then you get onboarded to product and it feels like you're using SAP instead of a new like modern app experience and the marketing was really modern, there's a huge disconnect and can be a lack of trust and credibility. So it ties in from, you need the strong value proposition, but then the experience that follows also has to be top-notch across the board.
Yeah, then I think Sandra mentioned that when they were launching into Sweden and now they've been able to gain the 18% awareness. What kind of a KPIs you would need to have in the beginning that are easy to follow and for the brand in the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, if you can there's different metrics, but try to plug in as much as you can to the business metrics. And then, of course, you've got to look at things like, it's also different for B2B and B2C, but for B2B, you want to look at what's the contribution to the pipeline coming from marketing activity. You want to look at the cost per acquisition, things like that. And then the more of an e-commerce business you are, the closer you can get to cost per sale and metrics like that. But looking at overall how much of the marketing investment is driving the actual sales is key.
Yeah. So now you have value proposition, you have your brand ready. What comes next?
Yeah.
What do you need to accomplish
then? Hopefully you're kind of ready to scale. So you've got a value proposition that you've got an idea that it works. People are interested. It's not you talking about yourself. And then you've got a decent customer journey in place that people can come in, move through it, learn about your product, and convert. Then it comes down to experimenting different ways to drive acquisition. And then experimenting broadly, but then focusing really narrowly. So if you find that you're getting success with, let's say, LinkedIn, for example, double down on that. Don't push then the agency or the team to be like, okay, we want a TikTok channel as well, and just get distracted and try to do everything in media.
Focus on what works.
For sure. You're essentially trying to drive discoverability of your business. So you've got your journey in place, you've got your value proposition, then it's like, okay, how do you be in the right place at the right time for your target customer that they're going to come across you? And almost aim for them to feel like they're discovering your business rather than you pushing it to them.
But it's in the contradiction that more you try, the more lucky you might get, isn't it?
I don't know.
Okay, and then a few questions still about the actual defining the ICP. For example, in your case, you are both B2G and B2B. So how do you define when you go on new markets that what is really your ideal customer profile?
Well, I think in our case with ISI, we've got a pretty good idea of who we want to talk to in the organizations, the decision makers. And that comes from working closely with sales to get the insight. And then the key thing is to make sure that the marketing is like fully targeted and not just going broad. I mean, the other thing is like, once you know who your audience are, you can start to create content for them. But then that content is not going to reach them automatically. I mean, if you start pushing content out on social media frequently, it's totally not free marketing because your target customers are not following you yet. They don't know who you are. So you're going to have to invest some of the budget as well into the targeting and paid media to get that content in front of the decision makers. But for us, it's about defining those and trying different segments too. So we've experimented with trying more senior stakeholders in the organization and more junior ones, and then breaking it down by country. And when you run those experiments, it's just really important to build out, it's a bit technical, but separate campaigns for each market and each segment so that all of your data doesn't average out, but you can then compare. And you might see that, okay, we've seen it, for example, in certain parts of the world, there's like just 3-4 times more engagement with our social content and top of the funnel content than in other markets. And then you can see also with different platforms, like how much engagement you're getting from certain organizations and so on. Yeah.
So a lot of data needed. You make it sound very easy that you're just in a control and you pull it from here.
Yeah, it's not messy at all. Yeah.
It's all clear.
It's super clear.
But hey, I hope at least we got some points for the growth entrepreneurs when thinking about the new markets. First of all, sharpen your message. That was one of the things. So get your value proposition right and understanding that the brand is not just a nice font and a logo, but it's a lot of other things. But the main part is the value proposition.
100%. And just make sure it can be understood. We're so close to our business, our product, our services. We always forget and think everybody else understands it. And they don't. They don't understand it and they don't care. So you have to take time and understand that creating great copy, creating great messaging is not easy. It's not like, oh yeah, marketing guys, just do it in 5 minutes, come out with some genius one-liners and sell the product. So give the marketing and the brand the same care you give the product would be my second call on the second one.
Yes, and the third thing is about the experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, experiment with acquisition and how to get growth. You got to think about really like, where are your customers actually coming from? They're not going to come out of thin air. And then focus on getting really good at that. And if you nail one channel or one strategy, it can be huge. You don't have to have 5-10 different channels bringing quality leads in. If you find a winning formula, you can scale it pretty big without needing to go broader. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that was. We are almost
Cheers.
done. Yeah.
Very nice. I think you could tell that two marketeers really know what they're doing. I think it was really exciting to hear and also encouraging that despite the fact there's also like a lot of work in order to make sure that the marketing message is right, but it's doable, and especially if marketing and sales, they work together. So we have come to the point where we've heard our experts to open up a bit their expertise field coming from the macro level down to some real-life examples and tips and tricks. At this point in time, we're going to say thank you and goodbye to our online audience. I hope you got some great insights and inspiring examples to keep up with the good growth, because the Growth Multipliers is a series of events, so we hope to see you there online or on site soon again. And we hope all you today getting some tips and tricks also to grow your business. Thanks a lot.